Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 15 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this episode, we are going to improve our factory's efficiency with fluids, including making syngas and kerosene. Enjoy! There's a couple of things we were doing that is very wasteful with tar, and we did it just because it was easy. And one of those things is this carbon dioxide recipe, where we're putting in a ton of tar and getting carbon dioxide and aromatics back. It would be a lot better if we didn't do that and we saved the tar and turned it into coke first, and then that coke could be turned into carbon dioxide. But also, our factory is making carbon dioxide already as a byproduct. And one thing I like to do, every, let's say, few dozen hours, you can audit your factory and search for exhaust pipes. And this will tell you all of the places that you're wasting fluids and gases. So we're wasting flue gas there, carbon dioxide on the acetylene, flue gas there, the hydrogen, the carbon dioxide from concrete, and of course, our coal gas. And you can basically just go through everything you're venting and decide if you still want to or not. And as your technology changes, you have more options. So right now we are rapidly making carbon dioxide, but we're not capturing all of the stuff we're actually making. So we want to do that. And of course, we have these tanks. I'll use the standard big one that I like to use for gases, the 65. It's kind of unclear where this should be, and I'm a little worried that our bus started filling up real quickly, so I'm thinking I want to have 2 more rows on our pipe bus here. So I would want to fill that line and also this one. So we have an idea of where to put these tanks. Can't really see the pipe there, but it's there. And we need to have a on condition for this, so we'll space that apart so it's not next to the pump. And we'll use an underflow and just say try to get it to 10%. But I guess in this situation though, it needs to be after the pump. So you do have to be careful about where these go. Kind of space these out a little bit, something like that. It's still running at full blast. But now we need to get the carbon dioxide in here. And there we go. We are capturing that carbon dioxide. That was the easy one, and now the hard one. Because this stuff is going far away, it might actually be easier to just have a pipe going in the middle of absolute nowhere. And instead of zipping along the factory, it just goes straight down here and in. It's kind of crazy, but I think that would be better, because it gets this pipe out of all of this mess. And then we just run into the wilderness. Well, there's not much alive out here. Run into the ice. Are we gonna need a pump? Well, we have power lines here, so this is the perfect place to put one. So we might as well. And this cliff is annoyingly right here, but it should be okay. We can just kind of jump over it, and we'll put a pump here as well to insulate this part of the pipe and its extent. And it connects nicely. Always move things away from the center of the factory if possible. This is at least one pipe that was zigzagging along that we don't need anymore. And our tar pond is getting very low, which is good. We don't want it there. Shows you how rapidly we're using tar right now to make this carbon dioxide. It's kind of a bad thing. We did it because it was easy, but now that our factory is a little more stable and we have circuits, we can try to do it the better way. And now that we've done that, we can point it in the other direction, because our other carbon dioxide is right here. And how are we doing on concrete? Oh, we have a ton. As always. So this doesn't make much carbon dioxide, but it's better than wasting it. I try to have maximum material efficiency if possible, pretty much at all times, so for me personally it feels fantastic to be recouping this rather than letting it go to waste. And there we go. We have now saved that carbon dioxide, and this is still going. So now it's time to start on a new build here. And this is really straightforward. It's just going to be a single belt of coke and a giant line of high pressure furnaces and 77 megawatts making carbon dioxide. So I wanted to avoid doing this in the beginning because it was going to be a lot of power, but it is very materially efficient compared to what we're doing now. And this setup is technically only making 40. The new setup is going to make 600. It's going to be much better. And I'm fine with it being one belt, because now that we have splitters, we can actually combine all these belts. And I guess I'll just leave all this in place because it technically works right now, so why break it? That said, we can actually handle these belts correctly now. And it's going to be a little awkward. And because I placed those first, it gave us a filter, but it's easier to remove filters than add them. And there we go. We have our 3 belts. Where are we going to want to make this? Well, definitely nearby where this tank is. And somewhere where the machines won't be blocked. And seemingly putting it right here, they won't be blocked. This is a super simple setup. It's just 1 belt of input and 1 gas as an output. Now things are a little different because we have electric inserters. So we want to try to build this in such a way that uses them. And if you put them on the corner here, they can all benefit from the same power poles. So it would be something like that, and there would probably need to be a light in there somewhere. And let's see how long this gets. We might actually want to have 2 rows of them if this becomes huge, because we have 8 and then 16 and then about 20. So it would essentially have to be twice as long as this, which seems extremely long. So let's cut it off there and do a whole second one of these. That will be a lot of carbon dioxide. One of the reasons why I like to go big on this kind of thing is we're essentially reserving space. It's not necessarily that we need all of these right now, but by building it, we have reserved the space for them, and we know it's going to be here when we need it. If we only built a couple of machines, then it very quickly can become a situation where there's just no room to expand. Well, that tailings pond is empty, so we can pull it out, pull out our logic here, and now the tank, well, it would be at 10% if they were capable of being fast enough. And we are attempting to get it to that point by being more efficient with our carbon dioxide here. Also, in defense of big builds, don't they just look cooler? I'm definitely a big build factory kind of person. Looks like I put those inserters on there wrong, but they'll be fixed anyway. But I think it just looks cooler to have stuff be big rather than small. Certainly for YouTube, I think it's a lot more watchable to have big crazy builds rather than tiny spaghetti. And since it's edited to take all of the slow stuff out, I don't really feel the need to rush, that you aren't being exposed to any of the build times or anything. You just see a few items get placed and then bang, it's done. And once we get access to robots, it's not going to matter because the robots will just build it. So there's really no such thing as too big anymore. I think I put these in wrong anyway. And this build would definitely be smaller if it didn't have the gaps between the machines. Part of the reason why I'm doing that is actually in preparation for a future logistics option we're going to have, that we're basically going to be able to have creatures, essentially, that will move items for us, and they will be using biter pathing to do it. So what that means is if a biter couldn't walk between a building, that these logistics creatures won't be able to either. So if all of your builds have these nice spaces between them, it means that those creatures can just walk to where they need to go in a straight line and they don't get stuck, because your builds will literally be walls for them. And then they'll get confused and, you know, explore and try to find a way to get around it using biter pathing. Okay, there we go. Well, now we need to get the resources in here. And for this, we're going to need to have essentially a 3 to 4 balancer. We could just have this belt snake between all of the machines, but come on, we have splitters now. Let's just do this correctly. And I'm not much of a balancer person. I just Google balancers. I understand how to make them and how they work, but I'm not really a fan of planning them out and building them, especially when you use big warehouses and loaders, which are absolutely a part of this playthrough. That you can do basically any number of belts to any number of belts by just using loaders and some kind of storage container for it. But since we don't have those yet, we need to make one. And this is the basic design. It is pretty compact. A lot of the 3 to 4 balancers were pretty huge, so I do like that this one is smaller. So sorry it's a little dark in there, but that should be it. I'm just assuming it's balanced. The internet told me it was, so I believe them. And it is full flowing, pulling from all the lanes. And that is kind of important right now, considering our resources come from completely random lanes at times, just based on however this is set up. So having it like that is beneficial. Well, the output of each one of these is just going to slide along and go straight into the tank, and it will fill us up to 10%. So let's see how this trashes our electrical network. Of course, that has to be connected. Wait, why isn't this one going? It's on there wrong. That one's actually set to 10% too, but I'm just going to move the valve out of the way, because we're essentially going to want that to stop. And we've probably got some pipes we need to fill up, but, I mean, it's going up. Well, we can use radars to go straight here, see what's happening on this end, and oh yeah, it's at 100%. So it's just filling up the pipes, and yep, that one is rapidly filling up. And now we should see the main tank start to fill. And it gets to 10%, and now all of these machines will fill and stop. So what does electricity look like? Well, we've almost maxed out our entire electrical network doing this, because that's all high pressure furnaces, and the cellulose wave continues in here. That was just filling up a buffer, and it should be good now. There we go. We have made carbon dioxide a lot more efficient, and while we're here, we need to properly deliver the coke to the acetylene. Let's keep this going. It's amazing how Factorio is like a completely separate game when you have access to splitters. It's so different. Different in a good way, I'd say. That it is annoying that Pi makes you survive without splitters for so long, but you learn a lot in the process, and in the long run, at least with how long Pi is, you don't make that big of a sacrifice. In it goes. And we can combine all of these into one belt. I don't know if we actually need to make a balancer for this. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. So there we go. Automatic filters, and we'll just let it prioritize however it's gonna. And actually, our shale oil is almost gone. So we can get one of these tailing ponds back by pumping it full again. Anything else in the factory we'd want to save? Flue gas we can't actually do anything with. Same with the hydrogen, and that is the one dump of the coal gas. And then we can also search for the sinkholes, and there are two, and both of them are dumping the muddy sludge. And muddy sludge is very low value because you can make it with just a setup like this, where you put water in, make soil, make muddy sludge. It's super easy. So the only thing that piping muddy sludge down here would save is a tiny amount of electricity. That doesn't seem worth it. So if we want to improve our tar output, there is something else we can do. We can research syngas from coal gas, and syngas is basically a better version of coal gas. It has 400 kilojoules compared to 200, but that's still pretty bad as fuel is concerned. But for only adding a little bit of water, you get more syngas than coal gas, and most importantly, some free tar. So if you're just going to vent the coal gas anyway, why not turn it into syngas first and get some extra tar out of it? And it looks like we're actually starting to be clogged on the coal dust. We probably want to use both sides of the belt from now on, and there's no reason why we couldn't. So I'm wondering if the easy solution for this is just to have a balancer in here, and that will basically fill it up. It's still going to be pseudo sorted in places, but at least right here where all of these converge, it is going to be maxed out. And that means we can actually remove a belt out of here. We don't need to have this one specifically sorting the soot in a different way. Hey, it looks like tar is actually building up a little bit. Nonetheless, if we're more efficient with the tar, this whole setup will run less often. We do want to do this. So to figure out how much we want to make, we basically need to go to our original setup and just say coal gas and then turn it into syngas. And you can see that this is actually quite huge, where it essentially doubles our output of tar. So it's actually kind of crazy. We need to have 13 gasifiers, and we might just want to do 14. So would this be a good place? Well, I mean, there's space. So there's 12, and then we would want 14. It seems like the clog has unclogged. Now that we're using both sides of the belt, it can flow very freely. And for this, I'll also use a standard tank for me. I am going to use those other ones, I swear. And we'll have our tank there. We essentially want this same thing, but now it's going to be on this side. And the input of the coal gas. Let's put our overflow valve in here. And then in it goes. All of those are running, making lots of byproduct tar, which will reduce how much those machines need to run. And very quickly our syngas tank is going to fill up, and when it does, it will vent the extras. We are doing this just for the tar right now, and this is absolutely working. These machines are being held back now. Cool, that tank is empty. Basically, we're looking for ways that we can transition our fluids in tailings ponds to actually going in tanks and having logic. We can't really do much with most fluids because we can't easily burn them. However, we can handle the creosote, and for now let's make a temporary tank and let's say put it over there. And that's pretty close to full. We'll just unhook that for now and let it fill up. Because with creosote, we can actually dump it into making treated wood, and then that treated wood can be a fuel that just goes around our factory. And the build is pretty straightforward. We've done it before, but we need to know how much creosote we need to actually handle. And it looks like it's about 100, assuming we don't crank it up. So having 2 tar processing units should be enough. And we could actually do this anywhere. It doesn't have to be right here, but it probably should be because that's where the storage tank is going to be. Let's grab the tank I usually like to use for the liquids, the 80, and we'll plop it right there and it'll immediately start filling up. But this time have an overflow valve, so if it gets above 90%, the creosote will just be dumped into these machines here. And well, we have our junk belt right here, so why not send junk to the junk belt? But before we hook it up, let's actually make sure that it works. And strangely enough, this tank has actually emptied itself. So we're going to do what we did before with the check valve. Say if everything is below 95%, it'll flow. Because we want it to be high enough to trigger the overflow valve to start making the treated wood. Okay, the wood's here. And that absolutely filled up to 95%. And those are pointed the wrong way. And there we go. Extra fuel. Well, let's combine that to go on our junk belt. And that's actually kind of a lot. So let's put a balancer in there. And now we have lots of yummy wood going along. We'll just follow it because it's not getting sorted anywhere. So we just need to find somewhere to sort it. Craziness right here. Looking for treated wood. And it'll just go on there. So let's see this work. Yep, that belt fills up very quickly. It's going to be weird having treated wood just going along our belts, and it's because it's a square, it really stands out compared to everything else. And whoops, wrong direction. We needed one more on here. There we go. And we should be seeing this tank rapidly decrease. Although it is actually a lot of fuel, so we're going to get a lot of value out of it. And eventually, it will catch up. Meanwhile, everything else is looking pretty good. Those sap extractors are going strong. Circuits have basically caught up, and there aren't too many efficiency increases left. So let's do some new research. We're getting very close to our next science pack, but we do have some other upgrades we can do. We can research electrolysis, and that unlocks the electrolyzer. High energy cost for purification. This isn't a weak electrolyzer like I remember from Angel Bob's, that this is a 10 megawatt building. So electrolyzing things is very costly in Pi. And we can electrolyze regular water to get hydrogen and oxygen. We can do it to saline water to get sodium hydroxide, chlorine and hydrogen. We can recombine oxygen and hydrogen to get water. You can make iron oxide from iron plates. That's specifically if you wanted the iron oxide for some reason. And I imagine this is a hard mode Pi recipe where you can take the muddy sludge and basically clean it up. But since this is being done in an electrolyzer, it's actually a really expensive recipe, so just dump it. And also we can make saline water from sodium hydroxide. But note that currently we get the sodium hydroxide from saline water, so this isn't really a method we can use to generate it. So a lot of those recipes have no real use right now. But if we take this a step further, we can research shale oil development. And this gives us 2 new buildings. We unlock the olefin plant, and this requires electrolyzers to go into it. So that's why we had to research them first. And also the reformer converts petroleum refinery distillates into high octane liquid products. And that electrolyzer is a moderately costly building. So having to put 2 of them into the olefin plant is pretty rough. So it's actually kind of an expensive building. 4 storage tanks. But that gives us some new recipes here. We can now use steam to process the shale oil into condensates, light oil, and heavy oil. And condensates are pretty terrible, only 200 kilojoules. So it very well might be something we have to dump, but that will make light oil and heavy oil, which are far more valuable. The light oil, we already have something we can do with it. we basically turn it into gasoline and aromatics, and the heavy oil can be converted into kerosene in the olefin plant. And kerosene is one of the best fuels at 1.5 megajoules. However, this recipe actually reduces the fuel value a tiny bit, where heavy oil has 800 kilojoules in it. So that basically means this recipe has 80 megajoules of heavy oil, turning into 60 megajoules of kerosene. It's certainly much more dense, but note that you are losing some fuel in this process, so you're probably best only doing it if you really want to. Otherwise, just keep it as heavy oil. And that will be a much better use of our shale oil. And our shale plant is off to the side here, and it's kind of in an awkward spot, and it's much more adjacent to our tar processing as far as the materials it makes. So I would rather them all kind of be in the same place. So we're going to move this around and have lots more tanks of byproducts here. Otherwise, everything here is looking good. Unfortunately, there's no graphic on the exhaust pipe to show that it is exhausting. And it kind of works in a weird way, where it basically holds a very large recipe of something, and then when it gets it, it just runs all at once. So I do wish there was something visually to show us that it was venting. I'm sure we could create some kind of circuit network that would do that, but it is what it is. One other thing I did is I actually unhooked this coal gas setup here, and this is how I like to test if a setup is needed, is just unhook it and then leave it there and see if the factory is fine without it. And it very much seems to be that all of this running creates plenty of coal gas, so much so that we are turning it into syngas and then venting it. So as of right now, this setup hasn't been needed, so let's give it a few hours and see if it ever becomes necessary, and if not, we can remove it. Otherwise, it is funny seeing all those treated wood in our fuel belts. They are very obvious compared to the rest of the fuels, but it's getting used. I kind of want to come in here and fill up this other tank, so I'll just use picker dollies to move this down, trying to get it up, but it looks like we need to fill it up a little more because the rate is just a bit too slow. Really, at this point, we should be burning gasoline in our various buildings. It seems like a lot to be storing all of this fluid right now, but very soon we're going to have a lot of buildings that run on fuel for our next science pack, so it's probably a good idea to save all this stuff, because I can pretty much guarantee that we are not going to have enough liquid fuel before too long, so I would rather hoard as much of it as we can. Let's get this up to 990 and then call it full. And there it is. So we'll unhook it. And I like leaving the pipes like that because it's super obvious that something was unhooked there. Let's start planning our build here. Research is about done. Previously, we planned around having a half belt of kerosene, but at this point with splitters, we can very easily have a full belt if we wanted. So our new build should probably be based on having a full 15 of kerosene. So with 2 reformers, that will give us all of that. And although we already have machines in the tar setup processing light oil, I would rather this setup have its own machines, just so the ratios are correct and there's less calculating involved. So if we ever expand tar later, we can expand the tar machines and not worry about the shale machines. But in doing that, we will get a ton of aromatics and a ton of gasoline. And we have the heavy oil, we could crunch it down. It would be incredibly dense if we did so. And actually at this point, I'm guessing that the level of compression here is probably better than maintaining the fuel value. In the end, we're going to want it as kerosene anyway, because one of the first power plants that you unlock is a kerosene-powered plant. So you would want it to be in kerosene form. Although, keeping in mind, if you have a huge power shortage of liquid fuels, you might want to actually just burn the heavy oil, but the difference is relatively small. And this is going to create a huge amount of condensates that we might just have to dump, because it's going to be so much and the fuel value is so bad. But doing this will allow us to use all of the machines we have unlocked, and that's always nice. So we have some shopping to do. And we're going to have to get this shale oil into its new home, but that's not too hard. And usually when I remove things, I'll just leave the power poles and the lights because we already went through the effort of placing them there, so we will keep them there. And now this belt is no longer required. And I like the idea of sending the kerosene to the east here because we already did it to process the sulfur. So that means that belt is already there and can just take it further. Okay, that should be most of the machines we need, but first we need to crank up our mine here. Now that we have splitters, life is going to be so much easier. And this is a situation I wasn't really thinking about, but this is a great situation to continue to use the mechanical inserters because there's no inserter speed limitation here, and there's also 0 space for power poles. Every square is being utilized. We probably should try to balance the outputs of the sides. It's going to look kind of funny having so much stuff in such a small area like this, but that should really help max out the belts. Seems good. So if we don't want this setup to run continuously, we're going to need to have some kind of logic on it. And right now, we don't really need to run it for anything. So I'm essentially hooking up these belts just so it'll be ready, but we won't need to actively produce stuff. I'm guessing the logic that makes the most sense is probably running it for aromatics because it does create quite a bit. And it's going to do it with way less byproducts than the other methods available to us. It's amazing how different your design decisions are when you actually have splitters. We don't need to do any of this stupid stuff. We could just send things to where they need to go. So that should be all of that stone. Eventually it's going to clear out when the buffers get filled up. So we know this setup will produce shale, and we need to temporarily get the oil from all the way where it is to in here. Who knows how, but we do have this carbon dioxide pipe, so why not just follow it? This pipe's only going to be here until these tanks are emptied. We're going to implement a fuel pipe in our factory that isn't going to hold any one type of fuel, it's going to hold many types. For the fuel pipe to truly work, we're going to need a circuit network so we can make it a mixed pipe with multiple fluids in it. That is something you can do. But for now, we're just going to have to be okay with manually moving pumps and pipes around, which will in turn enable or disable certain types of fuels. Okay, hooked up. Shale oil is actively being pumped in here, so that will emulate these buildings running. And then it just goes into reformer. It is very low to the ground in certain places and very tall in others. So if we hook up steam, we should start processing the shale. There we go. Lots of steam. It almost looks like it's leaking. But there it goes. And of course it's going to get clogged on one or the other. But now it's filled on light oil and heavy oil. Let's do the heavy oil first because it's basically going in another tailings pond. And we can put the olefin plant in here. The buildings are a lot smaller, so I don't know if we want to try to line them up or not. Probably not. And there we go. This is a very unassuming building. Just breaking down that heavy oil into kerosene, something that's much denser. And finally, the last setup is what we've done before, and it will be integrated into the rest of the build here. And funnily enough, we have 3 of them already, which is exactly what we would need. So we can essentially copy the entire line here, just reuse it. And they could fit here. I was kind of expecting them to go that way, but nothing else is going to fit in this little slot, so we might as well. Oh, look at that. The tailings pond ran down. So all the creosote is properly processed. Well, I would like to try to use some of these other buildings here, because I tend not to. Creosote we don't really need in very large quantities, so how about let's use the 40 for that. And it does look like it would hold a dirty liquid. Funnily enough, that means we need to pump the creosote back in. So if we just turn the valve the other way, it will work. So let's put that there, and of course, the pipe is slightly misaligned now because of course it is. That's what I get. Changing my mind. And the tank's a little smaller, so it might need to process through the resources real quick. Just trying to use every item in Pi just to show the whole thing, even if it's something silly like the storage tanks. So despite these 2 setups processing their own light oil, I'm still going to have them all connected to the same pipe here, because in the future we might want to collectively use light oil for something else besides this. So now these are running. Well, we've got some extra kerosene in our inventory, so we can just clear it out. But that seems to be working pretty well. We'll have to see how long it takes for these to fill up. I imagine the condensates is going to fill up extremely quickly, but we should be finding our tanks starting to drain here. Okay, creosote's about gone, and now it has equalized. So to run a fuel pipe, we basically need an entirely separate pipe than all of the ones we have, and this one's going to have various types of fluids in it, and it's going to essentially go everywhere. And the first thing we should probably try to burn is the condensates, because it's such a terrible fuel and we'll be able to go through it really fast. And the way that you can control if something goes into the fuel pipe or not is just by moving things around. Vanilla Factorio won't let you intentionally mix pipes, but you absolutely can in certain ways. You can do it with robots moving pipes, and you can do it with things like picker dollies, and also circuit networks too will let you do it. When you have a mixed system like this, the fluids will kind of balance themselves out, because it won't let you mix the fluids, but the second the pipe becomes empty, it's going to put something else in its place. And they're not running anymore, so we can't really see, but as they run, they will actually drain that tank. So let's pick up some glass and see this operate. Or see how the shale oil in the pipe is decreasing. And then when it empties, the new fuel will take its place. And there it goes. Now these machines still have their old fluid, but then when they clear out, boom, everything gets replaced. So they can be on the same pipe, just not at the same time. And there might be some hiccups, but generally, if you have one fuel pipe, that's fine. It'll just kind of keep gurgling as the fluid types change. The main logic is, how do you decide what fluid to use? I'm pretty sure we're going to need a circuit network for that. So without the circuit network, we're just going to be using picker dollies to move things around. I don't know if it would work by having multiple byproducts just piped into the same pipe all of the time, because if there's a tiny bit in the pipe, it won't let anything else in there. So I feel like doing it in bursts is better, but we'll see. For now, we don't have that much stuff, so it's not too big of a problem. So we'll just let this keep running. Now we need something else to research. However, that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.